And we are alive, everyone. Welcome once again to the spoiler room. We're in Ms. March. We're halfway through Ms. March, so we're on I. So we're looking at a film called I. Yes, folks, I managed to find these films, let me tell you, folks, that begin with a single letter. And I always love challenging myself. Next month was easy, but this month was tough. But we found a film called I. It is from India. And it is from director S. Shankar. And I can't wait to talk about this film. So thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and popping your favorite drink with us as we discuss movie spoilers. And tonight, I have my right hand man who keeps coming back for more. He survived watching a 3-hour film just for the show. It is none other than Mr. Ian Simmons. How you doing, Ian?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about I for many reasons. And I love that much like M, both versions that we talked about a little bit ago,
Mhm.
the letter can stand for many different things in the movie.
It
It's not just
can.
one thing. It's like you go down this rabbit hole of initialisms. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because when I was looking for letters, I was like, okay, I could go with some of these others that are more popular. But then I ran across I and I saw the trailer. And the minute I saw the trailer, I was like, well, shit, I gotta watch this. I'm like, I don't care if it's 3 hours. I saw the trailer and I'm like, I need to see this. And then I saw that it was a Bollywood film from, it was Indian. And I'm like, I'm sure, Ian, because you, with your show, shameless shield plug here, real quick, is on your show, you've covered a number of films over the year or two from India, have you not?
Yeah, and I need to plan my next one. It's been a crazy year, but I do have a series called Spotlight India, which for the last little more than a year and a half, I've been co-hosting with my friend. He's a filmmaker and a student over in India named Shashwat Mukherjee, and he's been sort of my guide in exploring this world of Indian film, which my interest was piqued at the end of 2022 when SS Rajamouli's RRR came out.
Hmm.
Saw it, was completely blown away by it. And I'm like, this is a pocket, not a pocket, a corner of the cinematic universe that I have not really explored. So, yeah, it's been fascinating. So when you mentioned I was not afraid of the 3 hour runtime until my schedule got like so crazy that I'm like, okay, now it's crunch time. I got to watch this thing. I of course had to chop it up into pieces, but um, I'm kind of glad I did because much like a lot of masala films, which is what this is, which basically means it's every genre poured into one movie. There's a lot going on here. You could almost chop it up into 6 half-hour segments and like watch it as a mini series because the from where it starts to where it ends up and everything in between, you're like, how is this possible? But also, how is it so great? I love this movie.
I, I don't know how they manage this. I've been on a couple of those shows for your channel, and each one of these, and especially this one, I'm watching it and I'm engrossed. And it's funny because and we'll get to the synopsis in a minute, folks, who try to synopsize this film. But what's funny is I was about 2 hours into this film, and my wife came into the living room. She goes, "What are you watching?" And I'm like, "I." And she's like, "No, what do you want?" I'm like, "The movie's called I." She's like, "Okay, what's it about?" And I started giving her the synopsis. She's like, "Whoa, just slow." So I tried to whittle it down the best I could, and she was watching it, and she sat for about 15 minutes. She's like, "I don't have time. I can't watch this. I gotta do things right now." She's like, "I can't get into this." But she got sucked right in, and I did too. I'm like, how they managed to do this, I it's wonderful as a moviegoer because you're like 3 hours watching it, and and you're caught up in this thing because this thing starts at the gun pull and it just keeps going.
But you know what the crazy thing is, Mark, and this is one of the reasons that I have no time for modern Hollywood movies, especially, is because Indian cinema, be it Bollywood or Tollywood, they do this kind of thing all the time, and they do it in ways that you can't. Now, I'm only a couple years into this,
Sure,
so
sure.
I've seen
Yeah.
probably a couple of dozen of these films, but every single one of there's not a one where I sit down to watch it and I go to talk about it. I'm like, this is just like the other 3 hour Indian movie I've seen. There's so many, they're all just running together. No, they're all unique. They all have, these crazy production values and interesting points of view, and these stories that seamlessly skip from romance to action to horror to comedy. Sometimes a little bit too much on the comedy. There'll be like slide whistles and shit where you're like, that's a little bit too like Laurel and
Yeah.
Hardy for my taste. But it's just the kind of the cinematic language of that culture. But yeah, it's amazing. Like my favorite movie of last year was called Jawan, which
Mhm.
translates to soldier, and that, much like I, is an action film, a very romantic movie, very comedic, but they're completely different movies. Um, yeah, I wasn't. It'd been a little while since I'd watched one of these, probably maybe
Mhm.
a month or two. So the first like 10 minutes, I'm like, oh no, there's like a hunchback with this bubbly faced makeup, and he's like kidnapping this girl, and there's all this wacky stuff going on with like bodybuilders in a gym. What am I watching? And then like, oh, okay, just remember, you got to get on there and just like ride that first wave, and then you're surfing. And of course, it was smooth sailing. From I'm mixing up my metaphors, but from then on, the
Yes.
rest of the 3 hours, just like I didn't want it to end.
No, I didn't either. I was so engrossed in this story, but yeah, you're right. First 10 minutes, it assaults your senses in not a necessarily bad way. It's just like, wow, because I'm not kidding when I say they come out of the gate at the gunfire, that you literally start with this very vibrant, lively wedding scene, and you get who you assume is the bride, who ends up being Dia, our lead actress. And there's some hunchback guy. We get hunchback vision first, and then there's this hunchback guy who kidnaps her, wallops her over the head with a with, I don't know, it's like a barricade, the pole or whatever, and then kidnaps her and finds some remote, like, castle looking place, and he's all Quasimodo and got her chained up. And then we get like who she is through a series of wonderful gonzo commercials which show up throughout this film. And then we get to bodybuilder, and then it's like, oh, and then you piece together, oh, that how did we go from bodybuilder to Quasimodo? And it's just a journey that it goes places I did not expect, but basically, did you wanna try to give the synopsis, or I can try to
I'll
give
I'll
it?
give the
Okay.
high level of it.
Yeah,
So yeah, we'll just skip past the whole Quasimodo thing at the
yeah.
beginning, but there's a bodybuilder named Lingason, who's our main character, and he has this crush on a model named Dia, and the kind of the gag is that she's so beautiful and so famous that she is in literally every kind of advertisement for every product in this universe, and he's so obsessed with her that he buys every product that she shills, even down to tampons. Um, oh wait, hold on a
No,
second.
no,
You
it's
wanted?
it's a spammer. Go ahead.
Oh,
I
okay.
was blocking it, so
Oh,
my
fine.
apologies.
Okay. Um, I was gonna say that's pretty quite the wall of text there. But no, so he is obsessed with her, but she doesn't really know him or give him the time of day. He wants to become a world championship bodybuilder. He trains at an Arnold Schwarzenegger branded gym, in fact. He runs afoul of this gang of other competitors, and he makes enemies of them. There's this giant fight, which is
I
the
love it.
craziest, hottest thing you've ever seen. Just like a whole bunch of oiled up gold men doing John Wick shit. It's just amazing. Anyway, long and short of it is he ends up becoming a male model, which he kind of usurps Dia's co-star, co-model named John. Lingason becomes Lee, and he becomes the next big hot modeling thing. So he makes an enemy of John, and through another all these other connections I'll kind of skip over. He keeps falling further in love with this lady Dia, and also making enemies of the various people in her life of the lifestyles rich and famous. They hatch a plot to get revenge on him, and through the course of the movie, we find out how this naive, really buff but sweet-hearted young man becomes this vengeance-seeking Quasimodo character who we cut from these flashbacks where he's falling in love and becoming a supermodel and everything and traveling the world shooting these commercials to him encountering these people that he's seeking vengeance on that we're also coming to meet during the story and doing horrible things to them and finding out why he's doing these specific things to each of these people. If I had to summarize it, just like in terms of genre, it's the Toxic Avenger meets Darkman meets Meatloaf's "I Would Do Anything for Love" music video.
That's beautiful. That's a really good that's it with musical interludes in between.
Of course, with
Because
great musical
oh my
I mean,
god.
this is
Oh,
one of the problems with Indian films. Not that there's anything wrong with them. It's just that I try, and it's almost impossible to sell them to an American audience because they sound so daffy. But you'll get some of the best action sequences you'll ever see in a movie mixed with some of the most sweeping romantic, like truly like you're falling in love all over again like throughout the film. So it's like, yeah, you want to tell all your girlfriends or your wives or whatever, you have to watch this movie, it's so romantic. You want to tell your guy friends, yeah, but there's also these great shootouts and fight scenes that are just unbelievable. But then you get the feeling they'd sit down and watch it like, what the hell is this? And that's exactly right. What the hell is this? It's beautiful.
it is so beautiful because yeah, you go from comedic weightlift guys making fun of this actor who thinks he's more than what he is, who keeps showing up at the gym, to our Lingensen in competition with the other buff guy who supposedly it's killed a number of people, but they do this gimmick, and so he's winning, and the fight scene in the gym is just bonkers. He's grabbing weights. They're using, poles for weights as weapons. He's flipping guys. Bodies are flying everywhere. Uh,
I mean, at one point, yeah,
uh
he's got just the rod that supports
what?
the weights, but he's got two huge Schwarzenegger Hulk guys on either end of them as if they are weights. And then another gang of reinforcements comes in and he turns and looks at them and then attacks them with the guys he's got on either side of these poles. And it sounds ridiculous, and it is, but it's also so fucking cool. Like,
it it is one of the many cool action scenes in here. We'll jump around a bit, but basically the story is John is a sleazoid and he's trying to get Daya to sleep with him, and she's like, "No, I don't want
mhm.
to." He's like, "Well, I can make or break your career," and so she starts losing contracts because John gets her blacklisted. So she's got this this shoot in China she has to pull off, and that's how Lee gets involved in this. And they're in China, and suddenly there's this whole subplot of her lying to Lee of how she feels towards him because he can't act until he figures she's in love with him like he's in love with her, and then all of a sudden his acting is spot on, and and the ad campaign's going really well, and then they try to sabotage him. And really, folks, I've watched a ton of Western films in my age because obviously we're in America, and how they go from a love spat to hit an assassination attempt, and not just like, okay, we're gonna throw acid at him. No, we're gonna try to attack him with weapons. No, it eventually leads to him on bicycles with other guys on bikes on the roof of houses.
You've got BMX rooftop parkour, Mark. That's what
I
we're
know,
dealing with here.
I know. It's it's beautiful, and he's our hero guy, so he's like kicking ass, but they have him take just enough punishment so it makes you wonder if he's actually going to get out of it this time or not. So, he takes some hits, but then there's one point he spins his bike and takes out like 5 guys in midair. He lands and the bike comes down and he grabs it with one hand like a
And you know what?
badass.
You believe it.
You That's the thing is the world they create within the first 10 minutes of this film, they set you up for what type of movie you're in for. Like all of these, just like RRR, all of these, they set you up. They're like, this is how things are in this world. And you're either going to buy into it and love this movie and go, okay, that's the most ridiculous fucking thing I've seen. And it's still going to be cool because where are these cinematographers in Hollywood? Because holy shit, the cinematography in this film, and not just the action sequences, when they're doing the model sequences of these beautiful flower fields and they're doing the shoots, and it's just epic, wide colors, all they color corrected to make all the colors just vibrant as hell. It just like, this is gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like, most of the time you see commercials nowadays, you're just trying to like skip past them or, oh, this is my
Yeah.
excuse to go refill my drink. But, even though there are a lot of fake, I don't know how many these products are fake because they had one
Yeah.
that looked like legit Gillette
Gillette.
commercial. It was like Gelatin or something like that. So some of these might be like local products to India that I'm just not familiar with, but they had to have been fake ads,
Well,
right?
yeah.
But like every single one of them, I was like, I would watch this commercial on a big screen. I mean, the Gillette ad was a guy
That was
being dragged to the
hilarious.
guillotine, right? And this woman's like looking on in horror and stuff, but he goes in the guillotine, it slices, but all it does is completely clean shaves him and stuff, and like it's great. Um, and as far as like our hunchback character, yeah, you start off and like what his face is all bubbly and he looks kind of messed up and almost cartoony, but then as you realize through the course of the movie that is the fate of our hero guy that we're growing to love and appreciate and hope he succeeds, you're like, oh my god, what happened? And by the end, you're not laughing at that makeup at all. It's tragic, and you can almost feel the discomfort of, his entire body is just racked by this disease, which turns out to be the weapon that this triumvirate turned quartet of bad guys uses to get revenge on him, because they don't want to kill him, they want him to suffer, and boy does he.
And more, as they say. Which, yeah, there's another insane action sequence in this construction site that led to him getting injected eventually with this virus. It's a wonderful action scene that just, yeah, it's hard to describe. You're right. It's similar to Wick, but not guns. We're talking just fisticuffs and brawling and weapons, melee weapons. And yeah, you feel this tragedy because the performance of Vikram, who plays Lee Lingason, is so good in this. At first he's kind of dopey and goofy, but when he becomes the hunchback, he becomes this totally different guy, like a scheming like he because his revenge too is not to kill people but to disfigure them worse than or as much as they disfigured him. So like the first guy, the muscle competition that he had, who ends up being part of this league of evil, so to speak, against him, he sets him on fire. But before he does it, he calls the hospital. He sets him on fire, times it to exactly 30 seconds, and then puts him out so he lives, but he's horribly burned. I loved the one he did for the makeup artist, because the makeup artist loved him. She loved him so much. Oh, she loved him. And then she tried to roofie him and sabotage him with Dia, who at one point realizes, oh, you know what? I actually do love him. And then he's like, yeah, no, you're playing that game again. I'm not going to fall for it this time. We'll just act and it'll be fine for the shoot. So the makeup artist tries to do this. So Dia wonders, oh, is he going to cheat on her? But he does it, but the makeup artist still causes problems between them. So he does this concoction to grow her hair out in this wonderful makeup.
Yeah, it's like those National Enquirer, like Wolf Boy pictures
Yeah.
or Weekly World News from forever ago. He basically there's a little bit of the Joker's Batman plan in here with
Yeah.
the chemicals that make up your beauty products. When you put them together, they have these horrible side effects. And yeah, she essentially becomes a wolf woman.
Yeah.
Eh, yeah, it
And then he trains bees to like the specific honey, and they're dangerous bees that
oh my God.
he covers the one guy because the head of the company, okay, that's where the company, they also own this soda which proved to be toxic or have toxics in it. And so our guy Lee, being the upright standing guy he's like, I can't be part of an ad campaign for a soda that has chemicals in it. And so their stocks drop. So Rich Man blames him. So he gets his revenge on Rich Man by covering him in this honey sauce that he's raised these bees on to love. And all the guy's got to do is stand still and
And
let
then
the
the one climbs up his nose, and it's the close up of that. It's a CGI bee, but man, you just again you feel that like, oh God, if he just stands still, it's gonna be okay. And then you're like, I couldn't stand still if a fucking bee was crawling up my nose. And then like, oh,
he
it just puts you
sneezes and
right.
yeah.
Yeah, it puts you right in the middle. Even these characters you're not supposed to sympathize with, you understand what they're feeling in that moment. It's great. And towards the end of the film, I hadn't really picked up on it that all of these folks were living because I thought for sure the B guy was a goner.
Yeah.
But at towards the end, Lee's one of his friends from the gym days is helping him out with these schemes and sort of being his Alfred. And he goes to the hospital where all these people are being treated just to fuck with them. He's like, "Yeah,
Beautiful.
we're doing a documentary series called was it From Fame to
To Doom.
Dirt, From Fame to Doom,
Yes.
and we'd like to talk to you." And so they're all crying, they're all like, burned or filled with pustules or shedding, and it's through at this point late in the film that we realize that there are two other arch villains that need to be dealt with. One is Johnny, our rival model guy, who talking about like Mission Impossible. There's a great fight on a train, but this does not look fake. Even though I don't know how the hell they're doing all this wire work on top of a moving train, but somehow they did it. And so they deal with him. But then the big bad is someone who, and this is the spoiler room, so you've
Yes,
been warned.
spoiler, folks. You've been warned.
But even so, I did not see this coming
Mm-mm.
until almost like when he was twirling his mustache. I'm like, holy shit. The nice guy, the doctor, the father figure who everyone calls uncle, who is Dia's uncle, basically a friend of the family, who's known her since she was a little girl. He ends up stepping in to marry her because there's this whole thing towards the end. At the beginning, Lee Quasimodo kidnaps Dia on the wedding day. So now there's no wedding. And it's a big scandal because she has to, someone has to, well, no, this is going back before.
Her mom,
Lee,
yeah.
her mom was sick and all she wanted was for her daughter to get married. So Lee was going to marry her. But then that's when the revenge plot kicked in. But then the uncle decided to step in. Is like, well, I'll marry you to save your honor because this other guy who was a potential suitor, was telling everybody that, well, Lee and Dia have been running around, so they've obviously been sleeping together, so she's damaged goods, but I'll take the bullet and be the husband. And that was no good. So the uncle's like, fine, I'll marry her to save face. But you see this flashback
Oof.
where little Dia comes home. And it's the actress, like the full-grown
Yeah.
actress, so it makes it less creepy and totally way creepier somehow. She's like coming home. She's supposed to be 10 years old. She's in like this Catholic schoolgirl outfit and like praising her uncle. And the uncle is like looking at her and stuff. And then as he leaves the house, he spots like her laundry and he takes like two pairs of her underwear with and is like, oh, this is not good.
Yeah, and then we get another flashback to where she's a teenager. She's got a friend from school that drives
Oh,
her home, and this guy uh tries to kiss her, and she's like, no, no. She's like, she's a good, she's a good girl. She doesn't want to do any of that.
he steals a kiss from her. He like,
That's right. He stole a kiss on her cheek, on the cheek.
yeah.
It was.
Hmm.
And so he stole a kiss on her cheek, and she was like shocked. She slapped him, kind of a little playfully. She wasn't she was a bit angry, but just irritated. She runs off, and suddenly the uncle shows up, knocks the kid out of his ass on the bike, revs the bike, and then puts the kid's lips on the hot pipe of the motorcycle.
It was almost as bad as the curb stomping scene from American History X,
Oof. Yeah.
because you know how hot that thing is, and you see his face go into it just for a second, then it cuts. But like, oh, this and the kid was like what, 15 years old. He didn't
15.
deserve any of this. It's
Uh,
just this pervy old man. And but when the doctor has his heel turn, he's just it's incredible. They have that whole scene where Lee goes to their lair where they're all hanging out and he confronts all of them, and they essentially they
just
try
laugh
to
at him.
finish
Yeah.
him off. Yeah, they laugh at him, they beat him up, and he was going to be disposed of, but he escapes, and then he starts this big revenge plot. But yeah, it's a classic scene of meeting your bad guys. And then the uncle is there, and he's the worst of them all because you trusted him. It's like
Mhm.
I felt betrayed by this character and this actor.
I did feel betrayed too. I was like, oh man, because it was a little, it was a little odd, but like, okay, when we get to the point of him volunteering to marry her, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess a safe face. All right, a little odd, but all right, I'll roll with it. And then they show you the flashbacks. You're like, oh, oh no, this guy's a full-on creeper playing the long game because he's just a horrible individual. And yeah, he ends up being the worst of them all. But it, I love these schemes that Lee puts together, because this is a guy who, when you're introduced to him, he's kind of a buffoon, and he even admits it. He realizes he's a gym jock guy. He's all about his muscle and his body and everything. He's not exactly the brightest bulb on the tree, but he's a nice, good guy who loves to help people, and he's just a very innocent. But once he becomes, the hunchback, this guy's like, he's putting together chemicals, and he's coming up with this plot. Like with John, he actually plans out him getting his ass handed to him for part of this battle with him on a train, just to get John close to these power lines. And then he knocks John, and John grabs the power line, and then he knocks him off just in time. I'm like, that's planning. I mean, that's some serious, like, this is not the guy that we saw at the beginning of the movie at all.
Well, right. And what I like is that by this point, we know that he doesn't want to kill these folks. He just wants to disfigure them. So when they're on top of the train and Johnny is like standing over him, I'm thinking, okay, this is the part like in Speed, like in
Yeah,
Darkman, like in all these things where the guy is on top of the train. Oh my gosh, there's a tunnel. It's going to decapitate him or smush him or something. But I'm sitting there thinking, well, that doesn't make sense because he doesn't want to kill these people unless he's making some kind of a different,
right.
change of heart here. But no, grabs the power line, gets electrocuted, loses the arm, shows up later like this turtle
Yeah,
man, like can't
like,
communicate. He's blind. He's got the only thing he has left really are his ears, kind of. Yeah, it's great. Um, what was I going to say? I had a point and I completely
oh,
lost it.
it's okay. It's the thing is too, with the runtime, you don't really notice it because you're so engrossed in the film. I mean, and we've talked about this with longer films before, but we're living in the binge era now. It's almost like you're binging a TV show. You're right on how this is broken up, because like each sequence, you could break it up. Each sequence has a flashback, current times, his revenge plot. And oh yeah, a wonderful, could have been a short movie in its of itself commercial that is a full on production 4-minute music video complete with makeup and everything, and they just keep getting more and more involved, and usually the commercial is something somewhat to relate to his revenge plot. Like in the last one, in the last segment, again, spoiler room, when Dia finally realizes who he is, she still loves him quite a bit. But just as we get that revelation, we get this wonderful, like, 4-minute commercial that is Beauty and the Beast type of thing with angels fighting beast minions and angels taking her away and him like it's like this whole film in and of itself.
Right, and there's also another, kind of a blue tinted, like a
Mhm.
blue jeans commercial, like flying across castles. There's the one sequence, I can't remember what the product was for, if it was just like a fantasy sequence where they're in green and they're
And
like
a red.
almost doing,
Yeah.
eh,
Oh yeah.
yeah, but they're like in these green kind of billowing outfits and they're pursuing each other across a lake.
Yeah. Yeah. In a
It's
boat. Yeah.
right, and you're just, like, watching this thinking, I you use the phrase "short film," that's perfectly it. I would watch any of these completely out of the context of the movie, but we get these as part of the movie, and I would like to go back and I don't know if I'll have time to do this, but I'd like to go back and time this every half hour because I feel like you get, like, an action sequence and a music video, like, in those 30-minute segments. There's about 6 of them, I think, these
Yeah.
big set pieces right around that breakup, so that's fascinating. I gotta say, I wanna pull over for a second
Yeah.
because I realized, um, before I started watching this movie that I actually had a connection to this film that I had completely forgotten about.
Really.
When I first started kicking the seat back in 2009, 2010,
Uh-huh.
a friend of mine at my then job passed me a movie. He said, "Here, watch this." And I went back and I looked at my old review. I had to dig it up. And in my footnotes, I mentioned this is my first Bollywood film I've ever watched. It was a movie called Enderon. And it was a movie directed by S. Shankar.
Oh yeah.
Uh, yeah. So, and the thing is, in the beginning of this movie, this is another completely outrageous thing that if you aren't familiar with it, it'll pass you right by, but if you are, it's a tremendous in joke. In the gym scene, there was that one guy who was talking about, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna be in this. I'm auditioning.
Mhm.
I got to work out for this part because we're shooting on the same lot as you guys are doing your gym stuff." He was uh, playing the lead role in Enderon Part Two, and there's that whole thing about like, "Why do you have these 2 streaks in your hair?" And
Yeah.
he's like, "Enderon 2."
2.
It's about a guy who creates like a perfect android version of himself, and it's this
Uh-huh.
crazy action comedy. I don't remember much about the movie, but yeah, the memories came flooding back when they were doing all these in jokes. They dropped Shankar's name, verbatim as like he's shooting this movie like as they're doing all this
Yeah.
bodybuilding competition stuff. You The only thing I can think of is like the Austin Powers 3 opening where you've got like the Tom Cruise music video with Britney Spears and stuff, but we don't, you know, maybe it would be seen as too indulgent today to have like Steven Spielberg like make a action movie where he's like referencing himself in his other movies or something, but I love that stuff. It's its own cinematic universe.
It it is, and again, it has to do with the world building, and of all the Bollywood films that I've watched, either for your show or just on my own or whatnot, it is impressive how quickly they build the world to put you in to where you're like, "This is where things are gonna be." Regardless of what the film is, you watch it, you're like, "Oh, this is what this film is, and this is the world it takes place in." When you get the very elaborate short film type of commercials, you realize, oh, this is a world where they have these very extensive, elaborate commercials, and you roll with it. And they end up, not only do they end up bringing in the musical sequences, but the commercials, each one of them, when they show up, actually has to do, not necessarily directly, but as far as thematically, with what is about to happen or what just previously happened or what you have with the flashback or current event. The commercial, while gonzo and amazing as it is, and at random at first it might seem, if you pay attention to what's going on, you're like, that actually relates to what comes next.
Right, but it's not it's there if you notice it, it's
Mhm.
awesome, but if not, you're just watching these beautiful,
Yeah.
kind of romantic sequences. Um, and that's again, I hate to keep harping on it, and you can't really understand it unless you dive into this world, but, like, watching these movies, it just makes most of, the mainstream American stuff, like, it's not like these are older films or something. This movie is only 9 years old.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that I've watched is, contemporary to this age, and you're just wondering why it doesn't seem that hard to do something that is this all encompassing. Maybe there's a fear that American audiences wouldn't understand it, wouldn't get it. That's entirely possible. But I think if you teach them, gradually introduce a new language, I could see something like this, maybe an Americanized version of it, if they could keep everything thematically the same, but just hire fucking Ryan Gosling to play Ling or Lee. That
Or I
might
was
work.
thinking Matt Smith. He looked a lot like Matt Smith in some of the makeup.
I could totally see that. Yeah. I think these movies could be a hit. I mean, you could even take it down to 3, 2 hours, but
Yeah.
why would you? I mean,
Why
this is
you miss out on so many amazing visual segments, and I think that's part of it is it hasn't been watered down yet that movies are a visual art, and nearly all the Bollywood films, heck, even when we watched Hiss, even when we
mhm.
watched Hiss, there's still a visual aspect to it that's not in all Western film. We're not saying all of them, but a lot of your mainstream stuff, it's lost that it's a visual art. Whereas it seems like Bollywood embraces this and amps it up to 10. I mean, the red commercial that they have is completely like the red is like oversaturated to the point, they're doing like Michael Jackson moves to that. They're kind of even dressed kind of like Smooth Criminal style, but you can barely see except for the black like ties and hats and stuff like these silhouettes. So it's like this visual, like just this red palette with these like black shadows and images in it, but it's stunning. Or the wide shots where they're shooting the romantic ad stuff. uh it's they're using the full camera, and they're realizing there's art to just not just have what's going on with the two people, but everything around them is
Yeah.
there's art going on.
I mean, there was the last Spotlight India movie I talked about
Mhm,
was, I think, earlier this year. It was called, Ricky Orani Ki Prem Kahani,
mhm,
which basically means Ricky and Ronnie's, love story.
mhm.
And that was if you wanna talk about a weird mashup, that was almost like Zoolander meets The Notebook, but it completely works. It completely works. But that's another one where you're watching these oversaturated, like, brilliant colored themed set pieces. They have a
Mhm.
big red set piece, but it's different than the one that's in this movie. So yeah, you get filmmakers who are true artists who think about stuff just like, oh, we'll just do it in post, or there's gonna be a giant monster here, or we'll just paint that city. It's gonna look like every other digital city you've ever seen. A lot of these places these films are dealing in practical sets, in locations, in these lands that I don't know if people are just who are watching this in India like, oh yeah, I've seen that hillside a million times. Whereas an American audience, I'm watching it like, I want to go there because I've never seen a landscape like that, and I know this isn't being digitally rendered. That's a real place I could buy a ticket to and fly to tomorrow.
Yeah, it's the visual palette, it's understood. The visual medium just feels to be more understood, and maybe it's because they're given more artistic leeway, in it, because they aren't making necessarily as many films as Hollywood. So, maybe it's a time factor or the fact, but like you mentioned too, a lot of the stuff is practical effects, like the Beauty and the Beast commercial sequences, wire work and makeup effects. All the minions and everything are actual guys in makeup. Our guy Lee's in makeup. Dia's in makeup. Amy Jackson, who plays our lead actress, is amazing in this in so many ways. And also the fact that she's rather captivating, and I'm like, you're doing a movie about Quasimodo, this guy who's already made up to be ugly, and then you cast this very talented actress who also is captivating. You're like, that just made her even more attractive, I will say, being next to Quasimodo.
And that's this is the kind of the heartbreaking thing about Amy Johnson. She is stunning in this movie, and she's. I think the most revealing thing she's in is probably like the tank top when we first see her, like the white tank
Maybe.
top. When
Yeah, yeah,
she's in a lot of very sexy costumes, but they're not sexy because oh, you can almost see her ass cheeks. There's just a very very classic, very elegant but attractive costuming. Really accentuates her natural beauty. Unfortunately, because I went down the rabbit hole, like, I wonder what
mm,
else she's been in. After this, she did a few more movies, and then she got some roles, on, like, Supergirl, the CW show.
oh, sure, yeah.
Uh, and I looked up some of that, and she unfortunately appears to have gone down I need these lips to be a little bit more accentuated. I need
Oh,
to be able to not be as expressive in my eyebrows. And I'm like, "Oh, no, no." You look at the pictures from 9 years ago versus, like,
sure,
2 years ago, and it's like, it's just
sure.
so different and sad. But in this movie, with a lot of I don't know what it is. Hollywood seems to be, with the exception of probably Sydney Sweeney, like running away from classical, movie star beauties.
Mhm.
They don't have that problem over in India. Like, I am constantly amazed by how their leading men are like dashing, impossibly handsome guys, and their leading ladies are all goddesses.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, like, John and Lee are some, strapping young they're very especially when they give him the makeover because he's kind of the bodybuilder guy, and so he's kind of goofy looking with his hair and that, and then they give him the model makeover, and you're like, "Holy crap, that guy he looks like a totally different guy," but at the same time, it's like, "Damn, they got him looking," the way they cut his costuming and everything, it's just like, man, you're right. It is a more classical aesthetic to their costuming, to how they're shot, to the way they look, to where it's still very captivating and it'll catch your eye, but at the same time, not nearly as in your face as a lot of Western fashion.
Well, it's weird because, like, it's such a character transformation that I was kinda off put when they shaved Lee's mustache,
Yeah.
because he's got that awesome, like, handlebar porn stash kinda, like, through the entire, first, like, 45 minutes, hour of the movie, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and then he becomes the model, and you're like, "Oh, I don't know," but then it's like, "Oh, that's the version of the character," and then he becomes the hunchback, kind of
Right.
full time, and then at the very end, and it's a reason to stay through the entire credit sequence because, spoiler alert, Dia and Lee, after foiling all the bad guys, they run off together. They leave kind of the fame and fortune behind to go hang out at their countryside, wooden house. And she begins to help rehabilitate him, to take away the effects of this debilitating drug that he was clandestinely injected with. And you start to see Lee come back. And I love that they don't end on, "Hey, now I'm completely perfect." They end on, he's somewhere in between. He's, like,
Mhm.
not quite all Brundlefly, but he's not completely the Lee that we knew at the beginning of the movie. It's just such a sweet note because it speaks to, the love is not just skin deep idea of this movie.
Yeah, no, and you get that with our lead, Dia. She, once she realizes who this guy is, and at one point he even says, "Well, I killed him." She's like, "What'd you do with Lee?" And he's like, "Well, I killed him." And then we find in a flashback kind of sort of did. They faked Lee's death because he got all disfigured, and he was making his life as a model. So they killed him. So all these crimes that didn't involve death but involved disfigurement, they have no idea who committed them because this guy doesn't exist anymore.
Well, and I also love that, I've got critic brain. I can't turn it off when I'm watching a
Sure.
movie. So I'm loving every moment of this movie until I see what I consider to be a gaping plot hole,
Mhm.
which is during these revenge sequences, Quasimodo Lee shows up and you've got all the bad guys. And of course, that classic moment of saying, "Oh my God, it's you," right
Yep.
before they get, attacked. But I'm like, but why isn't, how is it that they recognize him, but Dia doesn't
Right.
when like there's that instant recognition? You realize it's because they've encountered him before. He revealed
Right.
himself to them beforehand, whereas, she's coming in kind of cold. I'm like, I really like that. This movie is well thought out, more well thought out than last than anything since like Avengers Endgame in terms of the MCU.
Well, and even their montages and that you get here, don't leave anything out, but they tell a wonderful story. Like you said, even during the credit sequence, we're getting a montage of how they're rehabilitating Lee and, the doctor that he does trust. Because what ends up happening is Lee uh, 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 tries to commit suicide, but he fails. And so they take him to a doctor other than the doctor he's been seeing, the family doctor, this whole time. And this guy, who is completely like a third party, is going, "Yeah, no, you don't have a disease. You were injected with shit, dude." And he's the one that helps them kind of rehabilitate later. And it the performance of Amy Jackson in this is what helps bring so much heart to this film when he's Quasimodo, because especially even during the montage, you see her genuinely helping him. And it's such an odd couple to see them together, but she just through, and there's no dialogue or anything, but just through her action and everything, you're like, I'm buying that this couple is in love. Like I'm buying that she's in love with this guy regardless of how he looks. And it's wild because there's really no dialogue or anything, but you just, her performance, you're just like, I buy it, you know?
Well, I think part of the reason it's so easy to buy is because she's undergone like a full character
Mhm.
transformation during this movie. She starts off as a model and she's not like vacuous or arrogant or something. She's just kind of caught up in her business and doing her thing. And she's got this creep who keeps trying to make advances on her. But then when she, toys with Lee's emotions to get it at the behest of the director who's like, look, just lead him on, and we'll get what we need, and then you can let him down. She's kind of hesitant, but she goes along with it. And then she really sees how much it eats this guy up. And it kind of helps her understand, that there's more to him than just being this kind of, dumb actor that kind of fell into fame, and that his affection for her is genuine. And she comes to realize that she kind of loves him too, but it's a gradual process. And Lee, throughout the course of the movie, he changes as a person.
Mhm.
Yes, much like Darkman, the effects of these drugs and stuff, it kind of drives him insane to the point where he's willing to do all these things that he never would have even conceived of probably in his bodybuilding days. But yeah, I was watching this thinking, yeah, this is, I understand that I let off our Darkman conversation last week, talking about how tonally, like it starts off kind of like zany and there's too much
Yeah.
Raimi-isms in it, but it really challenged me because there's a lot of that stuff in here, but it does blend seamlessly with the grittier stuff, with the action, the comedy, the romance, and I don't quite know. Like Sam Raimi needs to direct a Bollywood movie. I think he needs that's gonna be his second act in the next
That's
50
his
years. Yeah,
that's his second act doing a Bollywood style film. I'd watch. I'm a Raimi
yeah.
fan anyway, but I'd watch it. But yeah, you're right. Both our main characters take this arc, but unlike what you might expect, she's not a cold person. She's just a professional model, and she's not used to a lot of people outside of her mom, who even her mom you question occasionally, like genuinely love her. A lot of people like her. A lot of people think she's beautiful because, she and her career is helping theirs. We've got John, who just is looking, she's playing hard to get because she is not that type of person, which just makes John double his efforts because he's like, oh man, no, I could win her. I could have anybody, but I'm going to try to win her. So she's been around this entire world where people kind of not genuinely actually love her for a long time. And then Lee comes in and he genuinely loves her. And she has no idea how to handle this because she's like, oh, wait, you're for real. It's like, well, how do I feel? And, she hasn't felt that way for so long that it's like, I mean, her mom guilts her into marrying someone when Lee supposedly, quote unquote, dies. Her mom goes on a hunger strike to where she has to marry someone, plain. So poor Dia is pulled in many different ways. So she has a hard time, I think, processing actual love. And then when she does, it's a little late, but it all comes around to a very happy ending. Yay! I was very happy with the happy ending. Uh, for something like this, that could have easily you just expecting like Lee to die, like the event, like died, and she's just alone and heartbroken. Oh, you know, but no, Lee, we don't get a death there. None of the bad guys actually were killed. So Lee hasn't actually killed anyone. So he's not completely over the line yet. And it's like,
Well, yeah, I mean, you get the ending. It's kind of like Todd Browning's Freaks, where they're all just kind of left to, wallow in being these outcasts, these, no longer beautiful, perfect, able-bodied people.
mhm,
I mean, that's if they hadn't had the kind of the love montage at the end, the last
yeah.
shot of this movie would have been the disfigured doctor like screaming in his hotel or his hospital room.
Which
My
which I
goodness.
was which I was fully expecting, being, a lot of the films that we consume in from US Hollywood. That's how a US Hollywood film possibly would end, with just, him yelling the just desserts served and fade to black. And no, we get a loving montage in this house with all the fields of flowers, because that's what she promised they would live in, a little house with all these flowers that reminded them from the photo shoot they did in Japan, which at first we don't get to see the full commercials that they're shooting until later on. And at one point there's a freaking zombie one, and it's all for this eye perfume that the short film that is the eye commercial is Lee is playing the love interest of the female who's played by Dia in these commercials, and everybody keeps going to her because she's wearing the eye perfume. And then he puts some eye on it, and everybody's coming towards him, zombies, and it just I this movie is so endearing in so many ways. It has everything, like you said. What was the type of film you said that word?
Masala.
Masala. It is. It embodies every genre. It is broken up to where you could pause it and come back to it in sections. You can take this in smaller morsels, but I think we'll wrap it up here in just that I have yet to be fully disappointed by a Bollywood film, either when I've watched on my own or for your show, uh, because and it's why I enjoy foreign cinema, and it's why I tell people don't don't write off foreign cinema, because it's just a different eye shooting the film. It's a different way to tell stories, and a lot of times, especially with these Bollywood films, it's so refreshing because it's like there's no restrictions. It's like the here you've got this concept, go for it. You know.
Well, and also there is some weirdness that you have to get used to when
Well,
you're learning the language. For example, I watched this on. Did you watch it on Amazon?
yeah, they had the
Yeah.
warnings for the
The
smoking
the
and
the
for
smoking
for
and
the
drinking
drinking.
every time. It's almost like the J&B Scotch Easter egg in a giallo film, but like totally obvious. Every time there's a cigarette or alcohol appears anywhere on screen, you get this little Surgeon General's kind of like warning in the
Warning.
corner, like, wow. But what I loved about this is it, folks, if you're at all interested in this movie or in Bollywood films, Amazon Prime has like so many Indian films
Oh,
for free that you can watch. And also, if you've got an AMC near you, chances are they're showing, new Bollywood films. They've got, every week or so, they've got a couple of them that they play sometimes on prime time, sometimes on off hours, but you can go see these on the big screen. I was thinking I would love to see I on the big screen. Can you imagine those
oh,
commercials like in
oh
IMAX or something like
man.
that? Oh my God.
Man, some of those scenes, or where they're shooting scenes in China with the flowers, or like you said, yeah, I used it for this thumbnail, the one commercial where it's they're floating across a lake or whatnot, and it's just these wide angle, like beautiful scenic areas they're shooting this stuff in, and then you get the colors as well, and it's just like, oh my god, this is gorgeous.
Yeah. So I challenge anyone out there who's like, what is this weird movie they're talking about? Watch it. Watch the first hour. Just put yourself through the first hour of this movie, and I dare say you're gonna finish all of it, and then you're gonna go look up what else Shankar has done. I know he did a movie called 2.0, I think also with Amy
Yeah, that was
Johnson that I gotta
just
watch.
yeah, that was most recent, well, his second last film is 2.0, I think.
Yeah, but you're gonna wanna watch more of these movies and see what this is all about, and I talk about this sometimes with Shashwat on my show. It's a weird position to be in as an outsider coming into this whole, like, corner of cinema. I don't know if these movies are actually good or if it's just because I'm so new to them and it's so unlike anything I'm getting here in the States that someone in India could be like, "Oh, these movies are garbage." Like, the movies were much better 10 years ago, and then I can go back and like, "Oh my god, they were."
Well, they're even better 10 years ago. Oh, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, no, there's a theater here. It's not AMC, but unfortunately, it's over an hour. It's about an hour drive, so I don't unfortunately get to it. But there's a theater in Appleton, one of the Marcus branches, that shows a Bollywood film, like at least two new ones a month or whatever. There's always one over there. And every time I go, oh, I should go. And then by the time I think about going out there, it's done. And it's like an hour drive. So it is being shown here in the West and being consumed in some areas, and yeah, I like it just because it's a different perspective. Recently I watched and it completely different budget, but same vein in that it was completely like unrestricted as far as creativity. I've been consuming Richard Elfman movies again because I recently saw his film Bridget, Bloody Bridget at the festival, and
Mhm.
it's just this, like, and I used it in my review. I said punk rock fever dream because it is. It's just, it's got the narrative. There's a narrative, there's a story there, but it goes to some just wild, unpredicted places that just come up, and you're just like, holy crap. I mean, if you've seen Forbidden Zone, you know what you're kind of in for with a Richard Elfman film. But as wild and as gonzo as they are, they're unique in vision, in storytelling, and there's a narrative there, and it's different. It's kind of refreshing to watch, even if it's completely out there. It's the fact it's completely out there. It's imaginative. It's not a cookie cutter by your stand. And there's some formula films, don't get me wrong, that are entertaining, but it's why I think you and I both have really being drawn to Bollywood films, is that it's just different. It's like a different understanding of the lens. It's a different eye. It's a different way to tell the stories, and it's refreshing once in a while to watch these. So I agree with you. I see this. If you don't see this, pick one that looks interesting. Watch the trailer, okay? Because you'll get a taste. Like, that's how I got I, is you'll get a taste of what type of film you're watching. Because when I watched the trailer for I, it started similar to the movie. You watch it, it's kind of got the love scene. It talks, kind of set it up, and all of a sudden they cut to the muscle scene, the muscle fight, and you're like, wait, what? And then they cut to like this love scene in the trailer, and then they cut to the bike fight where he grabs it. I'm like, wait, And when I got to the scene where he grabs the bike, which is in the trailer, I'm like, well, this is on the list. I'm like, there was no question. I didn't even finish the trailer before I decided because I'm like, I have to see what this movie's about. And we were discussing in our pre-show. The patrons will hear our discussion before the discussion. Um, how trailers, a lot of Western trailers, you watch them, you're just like, yeah, that doesn't really do anything. I watched the trailer for that immediately wanted me to go watch it like right then and there because I'm like, wait, what is this whole thing about? Uh, and yeah, it's nice to get something different occasionally to watch and consume because you see what can be done and you wonder where that got lost in modern cinema in the West.
You just put something in my head. It'll
Mm,
never happen
mm.
for various reasons, but because we were talking about the Crow trailer in the
Yeah.
Patreon pre-show. Can you imagine, like, if you gave any of these Hollywood remakes to a Bollywood director? Hey,
Oh my god.
Shankar, I want you to remake The Crow.
Oh my god.
Even if it's not like a Bollywood version, but like get the
Yeah,
same,
yeah. Oh yeah.
actors or
Yeah.
whatever, and just say, no, here's $25 million. We're not even gonna give you 100 million or
Yeah.
whatever these things cost now. I want to see what you're gonna do with this. And they'll come out with a 3-hour adaptation of The Crow that will make people forget the 1994 version of The Crow.
Well, I mean, and we talked about it before too. I mean, you've got the Tale of Two Kaiju within a span of 3 months. You've got, and I enjoy both. I'm putting that out there now. I'm going to preface this by saying I enjoy both for different reasons. But you look at the legendary monster Monarch verse or whatever, the monster verse there, and look at how much those films are, and then you look at Godzilla minus zero or minus one,
-1.
excuse me, Godzilla minus one, and you look at that film and you're like, they made that on what? And you look at this, you go, they made it even, it's crazy. And yeah, it gives me pleasure that there are movies like out there, like Godzilla minus one, uh, to where if the West isn't doing it for you anymore, if Hollywood proper, California, isn't producing the stuff that you're really enjoying anymore, don't give up on movies. Check out a Bollywood film. Check out a Japanese horror film. You know, check out a foreign film in a genre that you like, and you will probably find something that, even if it's not phenomenal, it's going to be different and refreshing. And as Ian said, make you go down kind of a rabbit hole, and you'll discover something you do like. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I honestly think if it wasn't for the tail end of the pandemic, RRR may not have been captured as much as it was by audiences. But people were like, "Wait, what film?" And they've binged other things, so they're like, "Well, I can sit on my couch, I'll watch it." And you watch our, you're like, "Holy crap!" And then it starts going to the theaters, and you're like, "Well, I got to go see that at the theater now." And people are dancing in the theaters, and you know, and you don't see it that often. Occasionally you will with a Western film, but not nearly on the scope that these foreign films are getting. And I love it. I don't know. I just,
Yeah, I do too. The one last thing I'll say. Okay, two things. One, if you are looking to go on this journey and you want a primer on what to watch, you can go to. Here's my shameless plug early. The Kicking the Seat YouTube channel. I do have a Spotlight India playlist, and that's got all the films we've talked about in that series, and it's quite an eclectic mix. I'm not kidding when I say you're not going to find a movie on there that's like another movie that's on that list. But the other thing I'll say is if you do have a chance to go to one of these chain cinemas, or even if you have a like an art house that specializes in Bollywood films, go there like on an opening night for a new movie. Just pick whatever it is. If you can watch it with like an Indian audience, I got to see that, experience that with Jawan at the end of last year. It's wild because they're into it, not in an obnoxious, like, oh, I'm checking my phone, I'm talking to my friends kind of way, but it's like a party. It's like a watch party. When the star comes on, they'll be like cheering and hooting and hollering. And then when they come on like a few scenes later, there's cheering and hooting and hollering. But it's not a crazy zoo or anything
Mhm.
like that. But it's a really fun time. It's like going to a sporting event, but it's also a movie.
That's awesome. And well, we hope you enjoyed this conversation of I and hope you seek it out. And we haven't it's a spoiler room. We have, trust me, not spoiled it all. There's a lot of great elements in this film that again it's bingeable in like 30 or 40-minute morsels because of the way the story plays out. And in the end, I think it will wet your whistle to seek other things out from at least Bollywood, but if not Bollywood, just other cinema because yeah, there's just it's great to see a different perspective and understanding and makes you kind of fall in love with movies again to sound cliche, but you realize, oh, there's still people out there that really are doing this not just for the bank. Not just for the IP. They're doing this because they love making it.
Hmm.
Uh, and so yeah, so there you have it, folks. Ian kind of already licensed to shill, but you could go ahead, plug it one more time, sir. What do you got for us, sir?
Well, I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com. And as I mentioned, on YouTube, where you can find reviews and interviews and playlists like Spotlight India. So come check it out, like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And we'd love to have you over there. I'm also here every Monday talking movies with Mark. Um, and I want to, again, pull over and just recognize you've done such a great job the last several years of putting
Oh,
together these series of different kinds of movies, from like genre films to that the Kevin Bacon thing from that kind of kicked this off, to, I mean, we're doing a whole series on pre-code movies this year, but it's not like, oh, we're just talking about old black and white talkies and stuff. We're talking about a Bollywood film after talking about Fritz Lang's M. I mean, come on. It's just
yeah.
great stuff.
Well, thank you. You're very kind, sir. This is how my brain works. Though next month we'll have our right hand man probably cringing a bit as we do conga line month. Yes, it is
Oh,
conga.
that's great. That's a great name.
we're
Conga
doing
line.
we're doing conga line month next month, folks, as we're looking at King Kong films, kicking it off with the newest one. Yes, you will actually get a wide release new film episode of the spoiler room. That's not a VIP patron episode. That's where you can get them all the time, folks. No, this one we're going to be doing Godzilla X Kong. It just so happened we ran the wheel of random last week and it landed on Kong 1933, the pre-code film. Just happened to be the same month that Kong X Godzilla or Godzilla X Kong was coming out. I'm like, it's like fate. So we're going to be looking at Godzilla X Kong film. And then we're going to look at King Kong, Peter Jackson's. We're going to look at King Kong in 1933. We're going to look at King Kong Lives. Prepare yourself for that one. And the final week, because there was 5 Mondays, thanks Joe for telling us that, will be Godzilla versus King Kong. And if we can watch both the American and Japanese version, we'll be talking about the differences between them and that film. So we're going to end and begin with Godzilla and Kong just on different sides of the spectrum. So, or maybe the same side, depending on how you look at them.
Oh,
So,
I'm sure Godzilla X Kong is going to be on the spectrum, all right. But
and my shameless plug real quick, folks, specialmarkproductions.com for all your movie man needs. I just finished Review-a-Palooza. I've got one or two more to drop where I reviewed all 12 films that I watched at the horror fests at the beginning of March. Dropped all those reviews. There's a playlist along with the interviews I did with all the filmmakers that I could. That playlist is a night of horror / Midwest Weird Fest playlist on our YouTube. There, you can catch all of that stuff. I've got a whole nother slate of reviews coming up. I've got another interview with an individual who was also involved in There's No Such Thing as Zombies. I have a couple. I've got a written review out there of Bloody Bridget, Richard Elfman's new film, which you should check out. I got the written review out there now on SMP Reviews, where I've been trying to kind of build my brand of written reviews. And yeah, I got some other stuff in the hoppers coming. So, I just a little busy, but I love it, and I love talking to you, Sir Ian, and I love all of our listeners out there. Thank you so much for watching the stream or listening to our podcast. And until next time, we'll just say a good night, everyone.